most fantastic things that we do as a school are the residential trips. I think that they are what making Solomon High School a really special and unique school. They are really special and they enable the staff and the students to have really unique special bond.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Abrahams and I went on the Year 9 Israel trip last year. We took part in a range of activities like water tunnels in Jerusalem, we had a party on the Kinneret cruise and we stayed in Bedouin tents. We went on camel rides in the desert and loads more. Another really good thing about the trip was that not only did it really strengthen my existing friendships, but it also became much closer to many other people in the year that in the past I wouldn't have a chance to socialise with. And the leaders that were on our trip were really easy to talk to and we all stayed in touch with them. We got to stay in a variety of places all around Israel and we got the opportunity to experience the culture in all these different areas. I really found it interesting. The trip really does bring our year together as a whole. I would definitely recommend it.
Okay, I'm Mr. Lewis and I've run the Israel trip for 3 years and before that I was a leader on the Israel trip as well. A little bit about the Israel trip. It's one of the most fundamental elements of school life that we run. It's experiential. And it gives 2 weeks, or chance for 2 weeks in Israel for people to actually experience what they learn in the classroom. And those 2 weeks can make an awful lot of difference. It's a big difference between sitting in a classroom and learning about something and actually experiencing it. Where we go is all over the place. We visit Jerusalem, we visit Tiberias, we stay in the north, we stay in the south, we stay in Bedouin tents, we climb Masada, we get up before dawn, we get up after dawn. We do all sorts of different activities, varying from the religious activities and visiting religious sites to just the fun things like kayaking and boat trips. But all of it has an educational aim, which is to allow students to actually see, hear, feel, experience Israel, as opposed to just looking at it through a screen in a classroom. I think it's beneficial to the students, aside from the educational aspect, is that those 2 weeks, you can tell the difference between those who've gone away for 2 weeks with the school and those who haven't. And they grow up an awful lot, they become quite independent, they have to be responsible for their own suitcases, taking it around, making sure they're responsible for each other, got to be at different places on time. All of these things that you'd expect from a student and a person, but we actually force them to do that without them actually knowing. So that's a side benefit. I feel that the truth is that somebody who goes in this could be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. There are a few opportunities to go to Israel, especially in this day and age, and it's an amazing opportunity to go with a group. I don't think you can go to Israel unless you're going with a family. If you go with a group, it's fantastic, it's very structured, you're with your friends, and you get to see everything that you need to see in 2 weeks. No other groups go for a little bit longer. 2 weeks for us is absolutely the maximum and optimum number of weeks, because it gives us a chance to do everything without overdoing it. So that's why I think the Israel trip is fantastic.
I went on the Israel trip in Year 9 and it was such an amazing experience and completely different to a holiday. Like, we went around the whole country and we did so many different things. We went to Jerusalem to see the Kotel, we did lots of hikes like up Masada, went to the markets, did shopping, and it was just so different to anything that I've experienced before. One of the main things that really stood out for me on this trip was the friendships that we made. Like, obviously, because we've been a year group for 3 years, we all knew each other, but after the trip, especially like through the Shabbat experiences that we had and just being with each other for 2 weeks, we became so much closer, and now it's 4 years later and we're just as close. The trip really did change the dynamics of our year.
In 1996, I had an idea, and that idea was to run a school Israel trip for students at the end of Year 9. I advertised it to the students, to the parents. We had about 35 or 40 people on that first trip. And I'm delighted to say that over the years, since 1996 till today, we have grown in numbers and in enthusiasm to a stage where the Israel trip is perhaps the most significant Jewish educational event that we do as a school. And my aim always has been to try and show the students Israel in its entirety, what you can do just in 2 weeks, right from the north down to the south, the key cities, towns, the people of Israel, the language of Israel, the culture of Israel. But mostly to show that the Israel that you see on television sometimes, the Israel that's portrayed in the media, the Israel that's shown on the news programs and on the internet, isn't what you necessarily see when you visit Israel. The beauty of the land and the warmth of the people, and the cooperation so often between the people, and often between Jew and Arab, between Israeli and Palestinian, are not things which are reported on, are not things that people necessarily know about. And so seeing and leading students in Israel, taking them to the waterfalls in the Galil, taking them up Masada, showing them the Dead Sea, going to the Kotel, to the Western Wall with them for the very first time, watching young people get in touch with their own spirituality, their own ideas, writing their own prayers and approaching the Western Wall is a real moment of spiritual and moral growth, and that makes it really very special. And of course the friendships and the fun and the laughter that goes along with the trip, with any trip of that kind, makes it something that years and years later people come up to me, 30-year-olds, and say, oh, do you remember when we did this? Do you remember when we did that? And I've decided to go to Israel for a longer period of time or for a gap year, and that's really significant.